The HOA thought they could bully just another homeowner. So when they saw a car parked illegally on their precious street, they didn't hesitate. They called a tow truck and had it hauled away. What they didn't know was that car was an unmarked police squad car. And the person they just messed with? A senior officer whose captain didn't tolerate games. An hour later, sirens flooded their quiet little neighborhood. And by the time it was over, the entire HOA board was in handcuffs. The first thing I noticed when I stepped out of my house that morning was the silence. No engine idling across the street. No faint police radio chatter from inside my unmarked unit. No familiar black sedan parked where I'd left it the night before. Just an empty stretch of pristine HOA-approved asphalt. I stood there in my driveway, coffee still warm in my hand, staring at the spot where my squad car should have been. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd parked a little farther down the block. Maybe I was still half asleep. Then I saw the chalk marks on the curb, and the bright orange warning sticker on my mailbox. Vehicle towed, HOA violation. I slowly set my mug down on the hood of my personal truck. You've got to be kidding me. Silver Creek Estates was one of those hyper-polished neighborhoods that looked like it had been photoshopped. Perfect lawns. Identical mailboxes. Not a single trash can visible outside of designated pickup hours. It was the kind of place where people measured grass height with rulers and reported each other for leaving garage doors open too long. I'd moved in 6 months earlier. Quiet area. Low crime. Close enough to the precinct that I could respond fast if something went sideways. The HOA, though, they were another story. I'd already had 3 run-ins with them. Once for parking commercial vehicles overnight. Once for having non-approved window tint. And once because my driveway looked too official. They hated that I was a cop. And they hated even more that my car didn't have flashy decals to warn them. But this was bold. I pulled the sticker off my mailbox and read it. Unauthorized vehicle. Failure to register with HOA. Violation of community standard. No phone number. No tow yard listed. Just a smug little HOA logo stamped at the bottom. I pulled out my phone and called the front desk at the precinct. "Yeah, this is Officer Reyes," I said. "My unmarked unit just got towed from my residence." There was a pause. "Excuse me." "You heard me." 5 minutes later my captain was on the line. "Reyes," he said slowly, "tell me someone is messing with you." "Not someone," I replied. "An HOA." Another pause. Longer this time. "Stay put," he finally said. "I'm on my way." I didn't even make it back inside before the HOA president showed up. Her name was Linda Whitmore, mid-50s, bleach blonde hair, designer sunglasses, clipboard glued to her hand like it was part of her body. She marched up my driveway with 2 board members trailing behind her. "Good morning," she said with a smile that could have cut glass. "We took care of that unsightly vehicle problem for you." That was a police car. She waved her hand dismissively. "It was an unregistered vehicle violating community code. You can retrieve it after paying the tow and storage fees." "You towed a police vehicle." She smirked. "This is a private community. The rules apply to everyone." Right on cue, sirens began echoing through the neighborhood. Lots of them. Linda's smile finally started to fade. The first patrol car rolled in less than 3 minutes later. Then another. And another. By the time my captain's black SUV turned onto Maple Drive, half the street was flashing red and blue like a crime scene in a cop show. Curtains twitched. Front doors cracked open. HOA-approved Serenity collapsed in seconds. Linda Whitmore stood frozen at the edge of my driveway, her clipboard hanging limply at her side. This is unnecessary," she said, her voice suddenly thin. "We already explained the violation." 2 uniformed officers stepped out of their cruisers and walked toward us. "Officer Reyes," one of them said, nodding at me. "You reported your unit was taken?" "Yeah," I replied. "By the HOA." Both officers turned to Linda. You authorized a tow on this street? One asked. She lifted her chin. Yes. We enforce our community standards. Ma'am, the other officer said slowly, you towed a law enforcement vehicle. Linda's face twitched. It didn't have markings. That doesn't matter, he replied. My captain arrived then, stepping out of his SUV with the kind of calm that only comes from decades of dealing with disasters. Where's my officer's car? He asked. Linda took a nervous step back. It was violating. Where, he repeated, is my officer's car? She swallowed. There the HOA contracts a private tow service. What service? She hesitated. I'd have to check. My captain didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Call them, he said. Linda fumbled for her phone. While she dialed, neighbors started gathering at the end of their driveways. People in slippers. People holding coffee mugs. People who had absolutely not expected to see half the local police department in their cul-de-sac that morning. The tow truck pulled in 10 minutes later. The driver took one look at the patrol cars and went pale. Who called this in? He asked. Linda pointed weakly. We did. The driver stepped out and held up his hands. I didn't know it was a police car. They told us it was abandoned. My captain turned to Linda. You reported a police vehicle as abandoned? She opened her mouth, closed it. It was unregistered with the HOA. That was when the captain's patience ran out. You don't have the authority to seize government property, he said. You don't have the authority to file false reports. And you sure as hell don't have the authority to interfere with an active law enforcement vehicle. Linda's face drained of color. You're making this sound very serious, she whispered. It is very serious. The tow driver returned my squad car, rolling it back into its spot like he was returning stolen jewelry. The paint was untouched. The interior was intact. But the damage was already done. Linda Whitmore, the captain said, you and your board need to come with us. Her eyes widened. For what? For obstruction, he said. For filing a false report. And for illegally seizing a police vehicle. The two board members behind her started backing away. Wait, one said. We just follow HOA policy. So did she, the captain replied. Handcuffs came out. And that was when the neighborhood realized this wasn't an HOA dispute anymore. It was a criminal investigation. They tried to stop it, right there on Maple Drive. As two officers stepped forward to cuff Linda Whitmore, the HOA president suddenly found her courage again. You can't do this, she snapped, backing away. We're a private governing body. You need a warrant to arrest us on HOA property. My captain didn't even blink. This is a public street, he said. And you just committed multiple felonies on it. That's when one of the board members, a thin man in a polo shirt with the HOA logo stitched over his heart, lunged forward. You can't arrest us without our attorney present. He shoved himself between Linda and the officers. Bad move. Two hands grabbed his arms instantly and twisted him around. Sir, step back, an officer warned. I know my rights, he yelled. So do we, the officer replied, clicking on the cuffs. Linda watched in horror as her fellow board member was placed in handcuffs right there on the sidewalk. This is outrageous, she screamed. We run this community. No, my captain said calmly, you tried to. The rest of the board finally realized things were spiraling out of control. Another woman, maybe early 40s, dressed like she'd just come from yoga, raised her hands. Look, this was just a misunderstanding. We were only enforcing parking rules. You reported a police vehicle as abandoned, my captain replied. That's not parking enforcement. That's a false report. She opened her mouth to argue. Then a neighbor shouted from across the street. They've been doing this for years. Everyone turned. An older man stepped out of his driveway, shaking his head. They tow people for anything. Guest cars, delivery trucks, work vans. They make thousands off those kickbacks. More doors opened. More people came out. They fined me for my grandson's car. They towed my nurse when she was here overnight. They made me pay just to park in front of my own house. The HOA board looked around as the neighborhood they ruled with fear suddenly turned against them. Linda tried to regain control. "This is irrelevant," she snapped. "This is a police matter." "It is now," my captain agreed. "But it's about to become a lot more." He turned to one of his officers. "Get statements from anyone who's been towed or fined. Start documenting everything." The mood shifted. This wasn't just about my squad car anymore. This was about years of abuse. Linda finally realized what was happening. "You can't just dismantle an HOA," she said weakly. "We're not," my captain replied. "You did." As more residents stepped forward, the clipboard in Linda's hand started shaking. "And for the first time since I moved into Silver Creek Estates," the HOA was scared. By noon, Silver Creek Estates looked less like a quiet suburb and more like a crime scene. Police cruisers lined both ends of Maple Drive. An unmarked detective SUV rolled in. 2 uniformed officers were now stationed outside the HOA clubhouse, making sure nobody went in or out without permission. Linda Whitmore sat in the back of a patrol car, staring straight ahead, her clipboard confiscated and resting on the hood like a trophy. But the real damage was happening somewhere far more dangerous to her than a pair of handcuffs. Paperwork. Inside the clubhouse, detectives spread HOA records across a long conference table. Towing contracts, fine schedules, violation logs, bank statements, email chains. And it was ugly. The more they pulled, the worse it got. For years, the Silver Creek HOA had been quietly running a tow-for-profit operation. They weren't just enforcing parking rules. They were targeting specific homes, repeat offenders, delivery vehicles, overnight guests, even home health workers. Every tow meant a fee. Every fee meant a kickback. The towing company was owned by the HOA treasurer's brother-in-law. That little detail alone made several detectives exchange looks. "This is racketeering," one of them muttered. Out on the street, residents were lining up to give statements. People who had been bullied into paying thousands just to keep their cars. People who had been threatened with liens for refusing to comply. A woman in scrubs told an officer how her night shift nurse had been towed 3 times in 1 month. A retired veteran admitted he'd lost his savings paying HOA fines he never understood. Every story pointed to the same thing: abuse, extortion, control, and it all traced back to Linda and her board. My captain walked over to me while I watched the chaos unfold. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just still wrapping my head around how stupid they were." He shook his head. "People who think they're untouchable always get sloppy." That's when a detective stepped out of the clubhouse holding a thick folder. "Captain," he said, "you're gonna want to see this." Inside were printed emails between Linda and the tow company. Target list, revenue splits, and one message that made my stomach tighten. "If anyone pushes back, flag them for enforcement. We'll bleed them until they move." My captain exhaled slowly. "That's conspiracy," he said. "And intent." Linda wasn't just running an HOA. She was running a racket. And thanks to one towed squad car, the whole thing was coming down. By sunset, Silver Creek Estates no longer belonged to the HOA. It belonged to the truth. News vans lined the entrance of the neighborhood, their satellite dishes tilted toward the sky like hungry vultures. Reporters were already interviewing residents on their front lawns, microphones held inches from trembling hands that finally felt brave enough to speak. Inside the HOA clubhouse, detectives boxed up evidence. Computers, hard drives, bank statements, email servers. Everything Linda and her board had used to bleed the neighborhood dry was now being hauled out in brown evidence boxes. Linda was escorted out in cuffs just as the evening news cameras went live. She tried to hide her face, but it was too late. Her name, her position, her crimes, all of it was already being broadcast. The other board members weren't spared either. One by one, they were walked out and placed into separate cruisers. Some cried. Some argued. One fainted when he realized his offshore accounts had been discovered. The tow company's owner was arrested an hour later. Turns out when you run an illegal towing racket tied to an HOA, the IRS, state prosecutors, and federal investigators all get very interested very fast. My captain stood next to me as the last patrol car pulled away. "All this," he said, gesturing to the flashing lights and news cameras, "because they couldn't leave your car alone." I shook my head. They thought they were untouchable. They always do. The next week, the fallout was nuclear. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen. Their insurance was canceled. Their contracts were voided. Residents were refunded tens of thousands in illegal fines. Multiple class action lawsuits were filed. And the state stepped in to place Silver Creek Estates under emergency management. The HOA was officially dissolved. No more fines. No more towing. No more clipboards. Just homeowners again. A month later, I got my final update. Linda Whitmore pled guilty to conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. 5 years in prison. The treasurer got 7. The rest of the board took plea deals. All because they tried to flex their fake power on the wrong car. Every time I park my unmarked unit now, I smile a little. Because somewhere out there, an HOA learned the hard way. You don't tow the law.